Future Trends is brought to you by the Institute for Economics and Peace.
Welcome to the latest edition of Future Trends, the weekly briefing on the changing face of global politics, economics, development, social and conflict. Here's this week's headline stories. German spy agency labels far-right AfD party extremist. Mali coup leader wins backing to be president. Romanian PM pulls out of coalition after nationalist vote win. Israel Security Cabinet approves Gaza expansion. New record in global military spending, and Welsh puppies stopping wildlife poachers in Africa. Now, for the latest in politics. German spy agency labels far-right AfD party extremist. The new classification makes it easier for authorities to use secret methods to monitor the party. A report by experts found that the AfD is a racist and anti-Muslim organisation, a finding that grants the security services powers to recruit informants and intercept party communications. The co-leaders of the AfD said they would take legal action against the agency's classification, describing the decision as a politically motivated attempt to discredit it. Mali coup leader wins backing to be president for next 5 years. Mali's military leader, General Assimi Goïta, has won the backing of key political allies to be declared president until 2030. The 41-year-old, who has seized power twice, was named transitional president after his last coup in 2021. At the time, he promised to hold elections the following year, but has since reneged, in a blow to efforts to restore multi-party rule in the West African state. Singapore's long-ruling party wins another landslide election. Led by Lawrence Wong in his first election as Prime Minister, the PAP won 82 parliamentary seats after it had earlier won 5 seats uncontested, giving it 87 out of a total 97 seats. The opposition Workers' Party maintained its 10 seats. Australian Prime Minister Albanese re-elected for a second 3-year term. Albanese will now be the first Australian leader to win consecutive elections since John Howard in 2004. The major issues in the election campaign have been cost of living, energy policy, inflation, and concerns over US President Trump and tariffs. Romanian PM resigns and pulls out of coalition after nationalist vote win. Romanian Prime Minister Ciolacu has resigned, and his Social Democrat Party is to leave the government after a far-right nationalist, George Simion, won the first round of the presidential election. The Eurosceptic Simion won 40.9% of the vote and will face a runoff vote against Liberal Bucharest Mayor Nicușor Dan, who narrowly defeated the Social Democrat PSD candidate. Turning now to news in conflict. Israel's Security Cabinet approves Gaza expansion. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced an expanded offensive against Palestinian militant group Hamas that may include taking control of the Gaza Strip, calling up tens of thousands of reservists, and controlling aid. However, the operation would not be launched before US President Trump concludes his visit to the Middle East on May 16th. Israel's cabinet also approved, in principle, a plan to deliver aid through private companies, which would end a 2-month blockade the UN says has caused severe food shortages. The UN and other aid agencies have said the proposal would be a breach of basic humanitarian principles and that they will not cooperate. World Court dismisses Sudan's genocide case against UAE. The International Court of Justice dismissed Sudan's case, accusing the United Arab Emirates of fueling genocide in Darfur by supplying weapons to paramilitary forces, saying it lacked jurisdiction. Sudan had argued before the UN's top court that the UAE was violating the Genocide Convention by supporting paramilitary forces in Darfur, but the UAE said the case should be thrown out. Gunmen kill at least 52 people in northern Nigeria. Nearly 2,000 others have been displaced over several days of attacks in Nigeria's northern plateau state, which has a history of violence between farmers and cattle herders. The violence is often painted as ethno-religious conflict between Muslim herders and mainly Christian farmers. But climate change and the reduction of grazing land through agricultural expansion are also major factors. Pakistan test fires ballistic missile amid rising Kashmir tensions. The surface-to-surface missile has a range of 450 kilometers. The test follows last month's killings in the Indian resort town of Pahalgam, for which India blamed Pakistan. Pakistan denied responsibility. India and Pakistan have fought 2 of their 3 wars over the Himalayan region, and their ties have been shaped by conflict, aggressive diplomacy, and mutual suspicion, mostly due to their competing claims over Kashmir. The rising tensions could also jeopardize an estimated $10 billion in informal trade. US imposes sanctions on Sudanese paramilitary leader. The US cited involvement in violence and human rights violations for the sanctioning of Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, leader of Sudan's Rapid Support Forces. Now for the latest news in economics. New record in global military spending. Global military spending reached a new peak in 2024, totaling just over $2.7 trillion, 9.4% more than in 2023. Military spending has been rising steadily worldwide over the past 10 years, but 2024 saw the most rapid rise within a single year since the end of the Cold War. US economy shrinks 0.3% in first quarter of 2025. President Trump asked Americans to be patient after the US economy unexpectedly shrank in the first quarter of the year, due to a rise in imports over exports, amid widespread concern over tariffs. That was worse than the 0.3% growth economists had been forecasting, and a dramatic reversal on the 2.4% annualized growth recorded in the last 3 months of 2024. The number of Americans filing for unemployment benefits increased to 241,000, indicating potential softening in the labor market. Xi's real test is not Trump's trade war. It's the sluggish domestic economy, largely brought on by an aging population, low-spending household rates, and falling house prices. Housing developers continued to build even as the property market fell. It's thought that China's entire population would not fill all the empty apartments across the country. The trade war will only add pressure to an economy already in downturn. US and Ukraine sign minerals deal to rebuild Kyiv and repay aid. Ukraine and the US will jointly manage and maintain co-ownership of the investment fund, with neither side holding a dominant vote. It will be financed by new Ukrainian oil, gas, and critical mineral licenses, with 50% of all revenue from the licenses going toward the fund. Eurozone inflation tops expectations. The higher-than-expected rise in April came as the impact of trade tariffs began to reverberate through the consumer basket, posing a fresh challenge for the ECB. On a monthly basis, inflation accelerated by 0.6%, suggesting that disinflationary momentum may be stalling. More worryingly for policymakers, core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, rose to 2.7% in April, up from 2.4% the previous month, and well above the 2.5% consensus estimate. Here's what's happening in development. Malta's Golden Passport scheme breaks EU law. The EU Commission took Malta to court in 2022 over the scheme, which grants foreigners a Maltese passport and thereby the right to live and work in any EU country in return for paying at least $680,000, buying or renting property of a certain value, and donating to charity. The EU's Court of Justice said the scheme amounts to rendering the acquisition of nationality a mere commercial transaction. UN urges TikTok and Facebook to curb rebel recruitment in Colombia. Rebel groups such as the FARCEMC are increasingly posting videos that glamorize life in their ranks and urge youth to enlist. The UN said social media owners need more investment in both automated tools and human moderators to take down videos posted by gangs and rebel groups that are targeting youth from marginalized communities. UNI's big overhaul amid funding cuts. The United Nations is considering an overhaul that would merge major departments and shift resources across the globe, according to a leaked internal memo. The high-level review comes as UN agencies deal with the fallout from US foreign aid cuts that have significantly impacted some humanitarian agencies. The satellite that will weigh the world's 1.5 trillion trees. The European Space Agency launched the first satellite that uses a special radar system to reveal what lies beneath the canopy, which will help scientists better understand the importance of rainforests in storing carbon and the impact of deforestation. $5 billion hydro dam project in Zambia and Zimbabwe revived. The two African nations are increasing efforts to revitalize the Batoka Gorge hydropower project after a delay due to COVID. This is a controversial plan, as it would entail potentially sourcing water from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Finally, the latest in social. Welsh puppies that are stopping wildlife poachers in Africa. The puppies are trained from birth in Wales in special feeding program. 18 dogs have now been trained and deployed in Africa. When poachers make a kill, they usually leave a trail of blood drops as they leave the game reserves. The dogs pick up the scent and can track the poachers. The program is proving to be highly successful, with many examples of poachers being apprehended. Nigerian teenager sets world painting record. Kanyeya Chukwu Tagbo Okeke, who is autistic, created a painting featuring a multicolored ribbon, the symbol for autism, surrounded by emojis, covering 12,304 square meters, bigger than a typical soccer field. The massive painting is aimed at highlighting the spectrum disorder and challenges that people like him face, amid stigma and limited resources in Nigeria. UNICEF reports increase in child labour due to global crises. The number of children in child labour has risen to 160 million worldwide, an increase of 8.4 million children in the last 4 years, with millions more at risk due to the impacts of COVID-19. Progress to end child labour has stalled for the first time in 20 years, reversing the previous downtrend that saw child labour fall by 94 million from 2000 to 2016. Mathematician solves algebra's oldest problem. An Australian mathematician has discovered a way to tackle algebra's oldest challenge, solving higher polynomial equations by using new number sequences. Polynomials are equations involving a variable raised to powers, such as the degree 2 polynomial. 1 plus 4x minus 3x squared equals 0. Warning over US measles outbreak. A leading US immunologist warned of a post-herd immunity world, as measles outbreaks affect communities with low vaccination rates in the American Southwest, Mexico, and Canada. The US is enduring the largest measles outbreak in 25 years, leading to the deaths of 2 unvaccinated children and 1 adult.
Future Trends is brought to you by the Institute for Economics and Peace.